Welcome back to the Morning Brief on Channels Television. And as we start off, we're focusing on the petroleum sector with specific view to looking at the tax modification order by Mr. President, which is supposed to provide exemption to deep offshore operations, and it would impact on products, commodities like diesel, feed gas, LPG, CNG, electric vehicles. So what will this all amount to, particularly with the objective of bringing down the cost of living? And that is contained also in the announcement as disclosed by the Minister of Finance. So joining us to have this conversation, we have Mr. Martin Onovo, a petroleum engineer. Good morning and welcome to the program, Mr. Onovo.
Good morning.
So let's start off this way. It's described as the bread and butter of the Nigerian economy, the oil industry, but it's not necessarily providing enough bread and butter on the table of Nigerians. And that would be, the immediate focus of Nigerians as far as this tax modification order is concerned. So how will this VAT exemption, how significant is this VAT exemption? And what would it amount to in terms of reduction in the price of these commodities? Should Nigerians be optimistic about this?
Well, let us look at it in the most simplistic way. Tax is a cost. Tax is a cost. If the VAT waiver takes effect, it reduces directly the cost of the product by the same very value of tax. So, yes, will it reduce cost of product? Yes, because tax is a cost. And once you remove tax, you have removed a cost item. So, to the extent of the tax you have removed, to that extent, the cost of product will be less. So it is that simple.
But how significant will the reduction be, particularly, for manufacturers who are expecting that if diesel is covered under this tax modification order, then maybe the price of diesel will come down. So will it come down to maybe 800 naira? Then for feed gas, LPG, cooking gas is about 15,000 naira now. So how significant will it be to bring down the price of cooking gas maybe to 10,000 naira? Should we be that optimistic? And we could also talk about the other products in that value chain as well.
Well, VAT is 7.5%, so just remove the 7.5%. But there are other issues. The bureaucracy of FIRS, there's a cost to it. There's a cost to it, so it might not be exactly 7.5, because if you remove 7.5% VAT cost and then you increase management cost by 1 or 2% in terms of bureaucracy, not a policy increase, then it will reduce the effect of the 7.5%, because the VAT management bureaucracy in FIRS, in and out, monthly returns, it's elaborate. It's elaborate, but in idealistic terms, if you remove 7.5% VAT, then your cost goes down by 7.5%. It is that simple, and you can apply it to your product cost. That is in the most idealistic terms.
As I think the point here is for Nigerians, and we could talk about the tax incentives, developing the sectors, whether offshore and all of that. But they just want to know, when I want to buy diesel, would it be cheaper? All the English that government is speaking, when I want to buy cooking gas, would it be cheaper? Because Nigerians can really do reduce costs on their pockets when they go to market and all of that. The question is, from your experience, and I know you're an insider, so imagine you've had conversations with players. From your experience, when policies like this are announced, what is the biggest challenge for implementation? and for people to begin to feel the impact? Because we've had different policies announced, for example, this import waiver bit, and a lot of people were expecting that the price of food item will drop drastically, but it hasn't really impacted as much, particularly from that end. So what is usually the challenge when measures like this are announced, incentives are announced, and everybody's celebrating it, but months down the line, you don't see the impact?
You can expect a direct reduction of the same margin, like I said. If you remove a 7.5% VAT, you expect a direct reduction in your cost of 7.5%. It's not more complicated than that. That's number one. But there are other impacts, because you can't use a single factor to analyze a multi-factor phenomenon. I've talked about bureaucracy, the FIRS bureaucracy, the tax management bureaucracy. If that creates additional costs for you in managing the removal, in reporting, in monitoring, in reviews, in investigations, that's also a cost item. And what happens sometimes when you don't feel the effect is that you remove on one side, you add on a different side. So this needs a much more comprehensive review and appraisal. But like I said, all things being equal, if you remove a 7.5% VAT, you have a direct 7.5% reduction in your cost. But VAT is not only your cost item. So if costs grow in other areas,
right,
then it will compensate for the one you have removed. But ideally, you remove 7.5% VAT, you can remove 7.5% from the cost of your cooking gas. So we can do the arithmetic. If you're buying 12,000 and you remove 7.5, 10% will be 1,200. So 7.5 is going to be like 900. So
right.
You expect a 900 naira reduction.
At least.
Ideally.
Okay, and that's if all things are equal, as they say, all things being equal in economics.
Exactly.
And that's why I raised that question about
point.
the hurdles, the challenges we've seen in the past when policies like this are announced and implementation becomes an issue. So we can watch out and basically police the authorities, the agencies that are meant to implement this. But I want us to talk about another bit of this conversation, because when we mentioned diesel and gas, I imagine people are wondering, talk about petrol too, right? Is there anything in it for petrol? Obviously not, at least from this particular measure. But there's another bit that a lot of people were looking into, and this is the elephant in the room. The refinery is getting ready. Again, we'll come to another point, but let's talk about this. September has come and gone. No show for Port Harcourt Refinery. I don't know if you saw this coming. Tell us, maybe you did, and what are the signs you saw? But I want you to advise Nigerians. Should we just stop expecting and move on to other things, right? Because it's important to manage these expectations. You are promised, and these promises fail from time to time, so that we don't get our hearts broken totally. Should we just, tune off from this and pay attention to other things, or continue to hold government accountable?
Well, the first thing is that we cannot plant mediocrity and expect excellence. We've discussed the Port Harcourt Refinery and the project management issues here before. And like I said, the project management has been very poor, extremely poor. I also suspect a lot of corruption, because some of the problems on the project will ordinarily not occur. And there have been several diverse problems on the projects. There have been industrial relations issues. There have been delayed payment issues where contractors say we cannot continue work because we have not been paid. So all those general project management issues have contributed. There has been poor planning because of the political pressure. We want it done immediately, and then everybody runs off without planning, and then that meets you on the way. So there are diverse small problems which could have been easily prevented with planning and robust project management. Then there is the issue of funding. Funding, for which I suspect a lot of corruption, because let me give you an indication. The Tema Refinery in Ghana, the 2 phases cost $3 million. $360 million for the turnaround maintenance. Port Harcourt is supposed to cost us $1.5 billion. So that's 5 times. That's 5 times. And yet we have these scheduling problems and funding problems. So I also think it will not be proper to analyze any Nigerian project, public project, without factoring corruption, because we agree that corruption is endemic. Everybody agrees. So if corruption is endemic and we tolerate it like we do, there are consequences. So when the consequences come, the media should not lament, because the media could have prevented the problems from day one if the media were a little bit more critical.
Well, Mr. Onovo, I wonder. Hello, Mr. Onovo, I wonder if that would be fair on the media, because time and again we ask these questions of the NNPCL, demanding that they come through with answers on the failure of the deadlines, many deadlines that they failed to meet the Port Harcourt operational target. And of course, we ask questions of its interactions also with Dangote Refinery, but they do not come through. And it is due to the diligence of the media that we had the revelation by human rights activist Mr. Femi Falana yesterday that questions must be asked of the Italian firm and the Nigerian firm Saipem on the contract awarded for the Port Harcourt Refinery and the failure to deliver on the promised date. And that's where I'm headed, for you to react to these issues. What would it take for Nigerians to get that accountability required of the NNPC to speak to these issues? And of course, from Mr. President as well, who happens to be the Minister of Petroleum.
I want to agree with you that the media has asked the questions. But I'm saying that you don't start asking the questions when it has gone bad. Like we say in English, prevention is better than cure. From the beginning, because a project does not just commence with field activities. There is scoping, there is contractor selection, there's all that. And if you get any of that wrong, then that follows you through the project. So doing professional work takes a lot more than that. And I can use another example that may be better. I mean, the Lagos Coastal Road, it is costing about 13 times what it should cost. And the media do not say they were not aware. I've also mentioned that on Channels TV, that there is no way you're doing 47 kilometers for 1.06 trillion. There is no way. We have used the African Development Bank standards. We have used the existing completed projects in Nigeria. We have used the bill of materials. There is no way. That contract is overvalued to a minimum of 10 times. And I'm saying that similar things may have happened in the Port Harcourt Refinery. And I just gave you the one index, which is the Ghana Tema Oil Refinery and their own turnaround maintenance. So, but because I'm not on the project personally, I can't give fine details. But you can compare. Anybody can do that. You don't even need to be an engineer to do that. And that's my point about the media, because it also goes with your political leadership. A semi-illiterate, morally bankrupt political leadership, you do not expect them to deliver world-class quality projects. But in this country, world-class quality projects are being delivered. The issue is that when it's a public project, because of the politics and the corruption, then you must pay the price. And that is the price you're paying.
All right, Mr.
It's
Onovo.
that simple.
Right.
One more sentence. One more sentence.
Go ahead, please.
Professor Niyo Shumbare said, incompetence weds corruption. And I think we need to think about it. And if you ask me, I agree with him. And I want to add that there is also lawlessness and impunity in addition to that. So there are consequences. You do the wrong things, you get the wrong answers. You do the right things, you get the right answers. Thank you.
Right. Well, I think it's important to put these things in perspective. So we fix the problem. The media, I can tell you about us, we do our bit, day in, day out, right? We do our bit. So I think it's important to speak to those who now have the job to do. There's a Minister of Petroleum, there's a Minister of State, there's a National Assembly. They have their oversight functions. Then we can talk about the NNPC Limited, the contractors, even the people. We will keep telling the stories. We'll keep following the stories, putting the facts out there. That's why we're having this conversation with you. So maybe if you have a certain section of the media or a particular media you have issues against, maybe that's the case. But I can tell you categorically that we have stayed with this before, during, and perhaps if there's an after, we'll be right here. I want you to also speak to this point, Mr. Onovo. So there's been the attention on CNG now, right? So the president or the presidency is leading, giving out buses, tricycles, and all of that, saying CNG is a much better option. And we've had people speak about their experience, saying, well, it costs them 100,000, for example, to travel from place to another place. But that's for petrol. But when they use CNG, it costs them less than 20,000. So clearly, that is cheaper. So I want you to speak to us about what then happens to this, well, Dangote refinery bits, the talk about petrol, the Port Harcourt refinery bit, all of the investment that has been put into that to at least get petrol as well as other derivatives. What then happens to it? What is the future really? Was that a good investment decision?
Well, we don't have enough time to go to the details, so I will talk in general terms. The first thing is that the alternative of CNG is a good idea. The technology has been here for 50 years before I was born, so it's not novel. That's number one. But it's here, it's available, it's an option. I think we should utilize it. But for governments to propose it as a substitute to petroleum PMS, I think that's in the long term. That's number one. Because your question is packed. There are too many questions. There is market for petroleum products here in the West Coast. So whether we do not use, if the Port Harcourt refinery is working, and like Dangote is working now, and we can refine every drop of crude oil and stop exporting crude oil, that's better for us. Because in the value chain, refined product is approximately 2 times the value of raw crude. So you are getting a lot more national revenue, assuming in the idealistic, incompetent mode of the government that we eliminate PMS use in Nigeria, that's petrol, and then we are all on CNG, which to me is not feasible because the cost of even a conversion is very high and unaffordable. So there are many obstacles, and you can't have this low quality of people. I call them semi-illiterates. If you look at Jagaban Tinubu's INEC form, he said primary school, nil. Secondary school, nil. So I don't expect the media to think that he can compete on the world stage. It's that simple. And if he has the authority to be controlling the professionals, then it is his decision. And then he needs to have the competence to make the best decisions. And to me, with primary school nil, secondary school nil, you can't make the right decisions. And there are consequences for this. So what I have noticed is that we do the wrong things, then we start worrying about the consequences. But if we did the right things at the issue, there will be no consequences. Everywhere else, the refineries in Niger Republic, they are working. I have a kinsman who just came back from Burkina Faso. And he complained about his phone and battery every time. I said, what is wrong with you? Get a power bank. He said in Burkina Faso, there is no power bank. They're always able to charge their phones. That's what he told me. I've not been to Burkina Faso, but he told me that if you import a power bank to Burkina Faso, nobody will buy it. So now you look at Ghana, the refinery works. So we come here and we have all these discussions perpetually, and we're just discussing, and we're pretending to be responsible when we are just very corrupt. And the indices are there, so we can't even deny. That's the fact. So we need ethical integrity. It is critical. We need competent people. It is very critical. And if we do not give it the attention it requires, then we will pay the consequences whether we like it or not. That's my emphasis.
And you know, Mr. Onovo, your message has been taken by those who should know, either directly or by proxy. And yet again, that speaks to the diligence of the media. There's so many other legs to the conversation, particularly about CNG. We could talk about the penetration levels, the needed infrastructure to get to, the domestic consumption needs that we require to exit the fossil fuels regime. But we must anchor at this point. And thank you very much for your time and contribution on the program. Mr. Martin Onovo, petroleum engineer, has been speaking to us on this VAT modification order of the president. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Onovo.
Thank you very much.